Hello and welcome back to Emma Tries, and today we are looking at GoMo. And I wasn't going to do GoMo, but I put a post on LinkedIn the other day and said about how I had used it for a client project and just did not enjoy it, wouldn't recommend it. And people were understandably curious about this, so I thought, let's incorporate it into an Emma Tries video and I can kind of walk people through it and explore, some of the positives and negatives as we have been doing. So, GoMo as a tool is a continuous scroll style authoring tool and uses a column based structure. So, if you saw the previous Emma Tries video, which is where I looked at Captivate, it follows a very similar structure to Captivate. And I'll go into this in more detail, but this obviously has its own positives and negatives. I find it quite interesting that they've said here about beautiful e-learning because I actually found the design part of GoMo very restrictive. So yeah, that's interesting that they are marketing that as one of their key features. So you can see here, it follows this very sort of drag your elements in. It slots it to a column based. And they do have some really good accessibility features and also language features as well, which we will explore as we get into the authoring tool. So let's jump in to their authoring tool and I will walk you through kind of a project that I've embedded in and we'll look at some of the features and functionality and go from there. So here we are in the GoMo kind of project space, or they call it a launchpad. And at first impressions, it's a really nice, clean, simple interface. We've got 4 buttons along the top here, and I like the fact that they are a mix of icon and text, so you can clearly see what you need to click on. So subscription obviously is what it says on the tin. You can amend your subscription. I think GoMo have other kind of like add-ons as well. So obviously I'm on a free trial, but you can upgrade and whatever. There's also team. So you can see here it set me as the admin, but you could add users to collaborate on projects as well, and support, which again, it's just FAQs and things. So let's jump into the authoring tool. And if you saw my Captivate video, or if you have used Captivate, you will recognize this structure. And dare I say it, I think this is actually even more restrictive than what Captivate is, which is quite a feat. Yeah. So this kind of project space, I like this. It's very simple. It's, again, very easy to see what I'm working on, where things are, how to create a new course. We've got a nice big button. And again, a few simple buttons up here. So we've got tasks and shared content, which again links to that if you've got team members or people working on a project with you. You can like assign tasks and people can complete them and everything. Themes and integrations. So integrations is almost like a kind of plugin that you'd put on your browser. So things like OpenAI and stuff. But we'll leave all that alone for now. And themes, and you can customize your theme based on these kind of templates, I suppose. So you can choose one that you want and then you get sort of full customization of it, which I will show you in a second. So you can see I added a sample course just to have a look around at the kind of structure of GoMo and what you can do and how other people have done things. So let's have a look in this test course first. So you can see that it's got this kind of branching style. And I actually quite like this interface. It's easy to see what I'm working on. The sort of branching or the dotted lines clearly show how screens or topics are connected with each other. And it's very uncluttered, which is nice. I don't feel overwhelmed by the amount of settings or the amount of things that I can click on. So these little buttons up here, this wasn't inherently obvious, but it's quite easy to figure out. So this is referring to your header and your footer, or it's kind of like a player, I suppose. And all you do is select the plus, and you can see that it comes up with a range of different options that you can add to your header and footer. So these are kind of grayed out because they're already on my player. But you can add things like a glossary, menu, all of that kind of stuff, and language selector. And I really like this feature because you can actually set your GoMo courses up to be in multiple languages. So this would allow someone to choose their language, which is incredibly handy, particularly if you've got a workforce or you work with clients or people from all around the world. So that's a really great feature, and one that I haven't seen on many authoring tools. So definitely a bonus. So then you just select that, and you can obviously change the ones on the footer as well. Up the top, we've got variables and course settings. So you do get the option to add variables into your GoMo as well. And if I select course settings, this is where you can change like your languages. So we can see here, I can add in, let's just add in French because that's the only other language I know. And click update, and you can see it then gives me the option to have it in English or French. You can change like the course name, the description, and this is where we've got our theming settings. So you can either choose a new theme if you don't like the one you're using, or you can click customize theme settings. And this is where you get the option to customize pretty much everything. So we've got things like the background scale, so automatically resizing the background based on your screen size. And I think most of us would want that turned on, let's be honest. We've got align content column height to the tallest column. Now this is quite a key feature, and I'm actually going to turn this off in a minute, but on my other test course, because this was giving me so much grief, and I'll show you in a bit once we've gone through all this. And then of course we've got everything down from like fonts. You can choose the sizes, the colors, the positioning of things, so like your background, if you want it centralized or if you want it slightly to the left or the right. And you can change like the sizing, default sizing of your content area. Now, I would tend to leave these alone because it makes it easier in terms of that resizing down different devices. We've got the same with buttons as well. You can see there's a really, really good range of settings when it comes to this sort of branding and customization. And although I was quite harsh about GoMo on LinkedIn, in terms of this level of customization and sort of this initial setup, I think this is very good. You can change the color of your navigation bar, the fonts, and I like the fact that you can set individual fonts for things like headers and body text and things, because quite a few sort of organizations might have a very kind of fancy font for their headers, but then that doesn't really work for body text because it's not very readable. So you can kind of balance those things of really getting your brand across, but making it accessible too. And we've got things around like topic titles. So if you want these things turned on, so like your page count and that, you can turn this on and off as well. And you can come back into this at any time. So if you decide that it doesn't look very good, you can just come back in and change it. The only thing that's a shame is you don't get a live preview. It would be nice to have like a live preview option so you could actually see the changes as you make them. But again, that might just be me asking for kind of being a bit picky here. But we've also got navigation direction, which is something I haven't seen in other authoring tools of this style, where you can choose whether people will go horizontally, so almost like a very traditional slide-based learning, or they'll go vertically. So this is kind of more similar to Genially. You can do this in Genially, where you can decide if they would almost go like you were scrolling on your phone. So if you are creating something that you know only people are going to be accessing it on their mobiles or their tablets, for example, you may decide to go for the vertical because that would feel more natural on that kind of device. We've got media, so what background color do you want for your like audio snippets, and if you want videos to be full screens, that's very simple. And these are like the little icons that come up on like image markers, so you can change that style. You can choose between a few different options here, and you can change the color as well and all of that kind of stuff. So I do think it's worth setting all this up before you get into actually building anything, because changing these things can actually really impact your content, particularly things like font sizing and font style. With how GoMo works in that column structure, if you suddenly choose a font that actually is quite big, you're going to really rejig your layout. So I think playing around with this first, putting maybe some test content in, seeing how it looks, and then going from there is a good way to go. So let's just close this and go back into our course. So here we are in our sample course. And let's just jump into this main menu here. And you will notice that much like Captivate, it has this sort of column-based boxy structure to it. And if I select the dotted line, you can see on the right hand side, we get the option to change our columns. So we've got 2 columns, you can have 3 or 4, and your assets or blocks sit within these columns. So if I go into split view, which allows you to edit and also see a live preview at the same time, you will see how this looks. So if I scroll down, you can see that all of these assets, so we've got a logo, a bit of text, and then I think that's another bit of text there, but it's white, so we can't see it. You can see that it stacks things because they've gone for this full width column, essentially. Now, within this, you can also edit your columns. So you can change the background color, the opacity, set a background image, and percentage width. And I'll show you the percentage width in a second. But you can see here, here's our navigation elements as well that we assigned back kind of in that main editor. Whoops. So let's jump to introduction paragraph. And you can see that's really simple. It's just 2 text boxes. And they've kind of designed this using very small amount of texts per page. But if I go to next steps, you can see this this is where we get the 2 column structure. And if I go onto our column settings, all you do is click that little dotted line and I go sort of down. There we go. You can see if I set this, so let's go for 30% for column 1, and then I go 70% for column 2. If we look at this live preview, you can see that it has now squashed this and made this longer. So you can play around with the sizing in that aspect to try and make things feel more balanced, but you don't have masses of flexibility outside of that. You can put in kind of more column or content blocks, which is where you can house your assets. So I could have a 2 column content block here, and then I might decide to have a full width one there. But in terms of kind of choosing the size of the columns, the padding or anything like that, you have kind of no control over that really. So let's have a look at some of the assets you get with this. So we've got our layout, obviously, which is our content block. We've got media, which is audio and video. Presentation. So this is kind of a mix of static blocks and interactive. And if I was being super duper picky, I would like these split out potentially so that it's easy to find things like a basic text block. But to be honest, that might just be me being a bit lazy and not wanting to read the menu. But you can see we get a really good actually amount of functionality here and interaction options. We've got things like image walls where you can click and there'll be states and image and information can appear and all this kind of stuff. Flip cards, love a flip card. Carousels, accordions. So actually, in terms of that functionality, I think it's pretty good. It's a good starting point, and we do get a lot in terms of variation of interactivity to add to our courses. We've also then got questions, and again, a really good mix and range of questions too. We've got things like number inputs, if you were doing maybe like a maths-based course or accounting or something like that. We've got our text entry, and I'm a huge fan of text entry. We've got the usual things like drag and drop and multiple choice and everything. So again, really like that, and I think that's a great amount of interactivity as well to start with. So let's go back to our navigator and click onto preview, and this will show us what the course will look like when somebody opens it on their LMS or their browser or whatever. So you'll always get this kind of loading page here, and this is slower the bigger your course is, and obviously with how good your internet is as well. Mine is mediocre at best, which is why it's probably taking that slightly bit longer. Okay, so here we go. So you can see this animated in, and you can add animations to assets and things as well, like fades or bouncing or the usual things. And you can see it's very much this continuous scroll style. And each individual screen that sits under this topic, so this topic is main menu, the screens that sit under this they've designed them separately, but they all form this this one page essentially. So you can see it looks all right. I mean, it's not groundbreaking. I do like this menu. I think that's quite nice, quite simple. And the buttons look okay. And I think it looks okay in this bit because this is quite a simple page. They've gone for a very clean look here with the white background. And to be honest, if you kept adding blocks to this and made it a much larger scrolling page, it would resemble a Rise course, to be like very, very similar in structure. So if you kind of go for this style, then actually it can look all right. And if I just kind of show you the different device views here, you can see it it kind of scales down quite nicely. But this is where we start to see the kind of little niggly bits that are slightly annoying. So this is a 2-column block, and you can see that it has essentially not lined these up. So the designer in me would want to line these buttons up to make it look neat, obviously. But because of the way that GoMo works, it just resizes things and sits things in that column. And there is no option to kind of align elements or assets within that column. So it'll always chuck them to the top. And if you have got instances like this where you've got text that is different lengths, it's going to leave you. If I could see like the outline of this column, if this had a background, for example, you'd see white space or coloured space underneath. And this is where it sort of makes the designer and me just cry, because you can't edit that and you can't stop it from doing that. I mean, it looks fine on like mobile portrait, and it seems to be okay in portrait mode. But when you switch to desktop, you can see landscape, sorry, you can see we're getting that space and everything just looks a little bit misaligned. I mean, for the buttons like that, it's not the end of the world, but I'll go into a test course that I did and you'll see it in a slightly more dramatic format, and we'll explore that in a second. But you can see you get to view across different devices. So again, that's super handy. You can see how your course is going to look. And like I said, I can't fault it in the sense that it is responsive. It goes down nicely. The elements resize nicely. And this particular course, test course, looks quite clean and quite nice. Let's go back into our, so if we click close that, let's go back into our sort of main Launchpad screen and have a look at another example of what they've done here. So let's go for the example courses and see what this looks like. So they have used 3 column blocks here, and you can see they've paired things like buttons with images. So let's preview this and see what it looks like. So you can see here this in action again. We've got one button that's just like slightly up because the text is less than the other ones, which, and like this is out of line and everything, and it just looks messy. And you might be looking at sort of watching this video and going, Emma, that is just such a nitpicky thing to be moaning about. But I think as somebody that is very focused on creating balanced, well-designed slides or e-learnings, this is really noticeable because you know it's different from the rest. It's like your eye is instantly drawn to it because you can notice that it's not lined up. And this is where it just starts to bug me a little bit because, yeah, you just can't move that down. You can't edit it. So you can see the way you kind of design this, like I said, is very similar to Captivate. You're designing these in individual screens. So you click add screen, and then if I just click here, it'll give you this blank content block that you can sort of shove things in, and you can obviously move things around by just dragging them. So let's jump out of this test course or this sample course and get into my kind of test one where I've played around with certain things. So here we are in my kind of test sample course, and the first thing I will just quickly show you is the topic settings. So if you right click on a little window here, you can obviously set as launch topic, which is like your starter screen, and there's also the option to change the settings. So this is where you can change the title, you can add it in your languages as well, so it won't do this automatically for you. You can change like the status, so if this was finished, if this was not. And this is where you can adjust this navigation. So at the moment it's set to course default, which is the click, sort of almost like you'd get in a traditional slide-based e-learning. You click the button to go next and yada yada. But what they've done on that other sample course is enabled continuous scrolling. So if I select this, as it says here, will display all the screens in a long page. So you can choose two ways to go about this. You can create the, like I said, the very kind of traditional style e-learning, I suppose, or you can go for that long page. And I'd actually be more inclined to use the continuous scroll option with this program. I think the click next and click next could become a little bit kind of hard to maintain a balance. So as an instructional designer, you'd have to be very conscious about how much text you're including per screen, because if you've got, say, an introductory screen which has got like one paragraph on, and then they click next, and then suddenly they're on a screen that's got, say, 4 interactions and 3 paragraphs, and they have to scroll down and read it all, and then they click next again, and suddenly they're back to a screen that's just got 2 paragraphs, that can feel really disjointed and unbalanced and a bit weird, that they're going from no content to loads of content to no content. So, and this is the same when we design slides and things like Storyline and iSpring and whatever. It's just maintaining that balance to ensure that you don't kind of get a little bit carried away and just putting loads of things on one screen, because going from not having to scroll down the page to then suddenly having to scroll down the page is just a bit like, it just messes with that kind of sense of continuity and that feeling of kind of like familiarity, which can actually, if you don't have that, can put a sort of higher cognitive load on the learner, because they just don't really know what's coming next. And like I always say, good design should be unnoticed. They shouldn't be noticing these things. They shouldn't be noticing the way that this is built. They should just be engaging with the content, interactivity, and the design and the functionality of it should be so good that it goes unnoticed. So I'm going to keep on that continuous scroll so we can see how that looks. And let's go into my introduction topic here. So you can see that we've got our 2 screens. So let me preview this. So because I've now set this as continuous scroll, it's merged these 2 screens together. But you can see that we've got this image issue with this image again. So this white box is our column, and the image is in the other column because it's a 2-column block. And because you have no control over alignment, this image is going to sit there, and I can't then increase or decrease the scale of the image. So even if I put in an image here that was 3,000 by, I don't know, 2,000 pixels, it still maintain that size, because that is the size of the image that it feels, that GoMo feels it can fit in there. And that's a bit frustrating, because again, you get these real problems with just trying to make it look nice. So you can set backgrounds as well. So I could set this to be an illustrated background, which I have done on another slide, and I'll show you in a minute. And then have these over the top. But you always got to be mindful of accessibility, because you obviously don't have much control over how your backgrounds scale down. And this is the same for any kind of continuous scroll e-learning tool or responsive e-learning tool. So quite often you're going to need these backgrounds on these columns, because otherwise you could risk the text getting kind of merged in with the background, and then you've got problems with accessibility and whatever. So then by having the background on these blocks, you then really start to see that blocky column structure, which can be just, I don't know. I think for me, I don't like the fact that you can see how this is put together. It feels a little bit kind of like an online magazine, I suppose, or in that kind of very segmented structure. So let's jump back into the editor a minute. And you can see that if we then changed like the column structure on here, and we could have the image as being, say, 70, and it's going to moan at me now because this is going over 100%. Shush. 70 and 30, like that. You can see the image does resize, but then we've got squash text. So I think it's a little bit of trial and error when it comes to layouts. And if I click on the kind of full screen, let's change this back to 100%. like that looks better to me. But again, we don't get any kind of control over, oops, oh God, what have I just done? Oh no. Over the image. It's added in a different image now. You can align it like centrally and everything. But yeah, it's just a bit restrictive in that sense. Like like to be able to choose between, say, a large, small, medium sizing, or just have a little bit more um, opportunity to be able to resize these images. Because as you can see, there's not really a lot you can do apart from add an animation and just choose whether it's aligned centrally or not. So let's have a look at our screen too as well. So scroll down, and another thing I will note is with these kind of interactions. So if I switch this over to smartphone, I really don't like this. And I think the reason is it just doesn't feel very user friendly to me. I would prefer to have the flashcards stacked. And I get kind of why they've done it this way is one, it doesn't take up too much space, and it allows you to maintain obviously the sizing on the flip card so you can still read the text. But I don't know, just adding a scroll bar like that, I think just doesn't feel very easy or accessible to people. Trying to use your finger to do that on a phone could be quite tricky. So I'm not a huge fan of that. And I know it does it with other interactions as well. I mean, the tabs in that go across quite nicely. I don't know if I added an extra couple of tabs, we'd get the same kind of thing, probably like a scroll bar. So it's just something to be mindful of when you're designing these courses, that you may want to work with these quirks, I suppose, that the authoring tool has. You can see here where they, on this sample course, they added this lovely space background. And this kind of words, Emma. This kind of reiterates what I mean in terms of the like needing to have those backgrounds over those like translucent, semi-transparent backgrounds on your columns, because otherwise this text would be completely lost on this background. So yeah, I think it's just working with what the authoring tool can do and being mindful of its restrictions. And you can see here, because this section has got that typical navigation on it, so that horizontal scroll, we get a little arrow, and this is then, it moves like this. And this is where I was playing around with some of the other interactions. So again, I like the look of it in this sense. I think you've got to be careful you don't go creating something that's too text heavy. But that's the same with every authoring tool. So I'm not going to mark it down for that. That's more of an ID problem. But I think it's just the way that everything is in its place. So it's all sitting in the middle. It's all kind of, you can't really do much else with it. It's got this very blocky, very kind of square structure, and it's just a bit like, it's not groundbreaking, it's not amazing, it's just a bit meh. And I think I found that with Captivate as well. It's not something that makes me excited to create e-learning. Like, I could create e-learning on this and probably make it as good as I possibly could, but it's just a bit meh, really. It's all right, but that's all it is. It's a bit all right. So I'll jump into the page that I actually tried to make look good. So let me quickly show you the course that I tried to make look good, and I named it Trying to Make This Look Good. And I was failing, if I'm honest. And it's really tricky because there is probably people out here that are maybe whizzes in this program that have used it loads and could probably create stuff that looks better than what I've done. And you can see I kind of gave up really in the end, because it was just not really, we weren't really getting anywhere. And let me preview it and I can kind of show you what I did. So I used my healthy habits structure, course, whatever, and have given the course a kind of like patterned background, which stays put as you scroll. And then this is just where we start to see these problems with the column structure and not being able to kind of size images and things, because I added this image into the column. This is a two column block. And you can see, because I can't really move it or anything, it just looks a bit weird next to this text, because again, I can't align this text centrally in the column. So it is always going to sit up there. And then where we've got the difference in the two content blocks, because this image column probably goes down to about here, and then we start a new content block here, we're then left with this weird empty space that you don't really know what to do with, and it makes it feel a bit disjointed. You can see I started to have a look at kind of putting in some flashcards and things, and again, I just gave up with it. I mean, I could have done a bit more with this, like added an image on the front and stuff, but yeah, I think it's just a bit mediocre, I think, is what like I kind of feel towards it. Because even if I go into here, let's go back into the editor, and then like I played around with switching the layout of this to be, you know, a full column, full width column, sorry. And then it just doesn't look right on the page. Let's put that back as 100%, because that was also partly contributing to it. And you see, like, this image is now massive, and I can't do anything about that. I can't rescale it down. I can't drag it to make it smaller. And I've tried like playing around with different sizes as well. But because this is a full width column, like content block, it's resizing the image to fit that space, which is making it like massive essentially. So this is kind of where that restrictive nature of this column structure comes in, and then it just doesn't look good on our preview. So let me just save that a second and then go back into our preview. There we go. And see, look, it just looks weird. Yeah, and this is where it's just frustrating. I mean, I've been able to kind of make, I think, the background look okay, and that kind of design of it look quite nice. But yeah, I think just trying to lay out your text and images so they look good is just really hard. And I mean, I could do it like this and then put that in there. And then if I go to preview, you know, we've got something that looks a little bit like this. But I also would question the accessibility problems with that. So if we're using like content, 3-column content blocks to try and help with the layout, I then wonder if there would be any issues with accessibility and like screen readers picking up that empty space. I don't know. Anybody that's used GoMo a bit more, if you could provide a bit more info on that, that would be great. But yeah, let's just rejig this. So I've played around with the column sizing. So if I go back into edit and the column percentage width, I've played around with that on a 3-column structure, and you get a nicer look with doing that. But the only thing is, I'd question how this would impact accessibility, because technically I've got a column now which has no content in. So I don't know if screen readers would pick that up or it would cause any problems like that. So that is, I suppose, a way of getting around the columns just looking a bit weird. So you can see this looks a bit more balanced now. And let's test it down devices as well. So landscape view, portrait. Let's try a smartphone. See, that looks okay. But again, we get this, this scroll bar, which just looks really bad. And then that doesn't look great either. So yeah, I don't know. I give up. I can't make this look good. I am defeated by GoMo. It's this is as good as it's gonna get. And with that, let's get in. So before I quickly get into rating, I just wanted to kind of clear up how I do these ratings, because you might think that they feel a bit random, because some authoring tools I've scored lower than this and whatever. So I tend to rate this based on the authoring tool itself and its kind of what it promises, the functionality that it's got, and how that impacts things like the customization and the sort of person that can use it. I'm not comparing authoring tools against each other. So these aren't like comparisons against the Articulate suite or against Storyline or against other authoring tools. I'm looking at the authoring tool as a single entity and how its customization, for example, rates in terms of the functionality it's got and how easy it is to use this functionality and that kind of thing. So if you notice that perhaps, say, this is rated a 4 for functionality, but then you're looking at something like Genially, which is rated, I think I rated it 3.5, you might be thinking, well, how does that work? But that's because as an authoring tool, a standalone authoring tool, Genially doesn't have that much functionality. So actually it does rate less. So yeah, so that's kind of how this goes. I'm not comparing authoring tools against each other. This is looking at it as its own thing. So anyway, now that I've caveated that, let's get into the rating. And this is going to be really tricky because these categories kind of all interlink with each other and cause their own problems. So ease of use from a UI perspective in terms of actually using the tool itself and the buttons, the interface, creating a new project, adding screens and adding in like assets and content blocks. That is all very easy and very clear, and I like the way that they've done the UI. I think it's if you were a beginner, it would be very quick to know how you could create a course and get started. But then if we look at ease of use from actually developing your course and moving things around and everything, that gets dragged down. So I'm going to set ease of use at a 3.5. I think, like I said, the positives are it is easy to use from a UI perspective. It's easy to use to create courses, to change the settings and all of that kind of stuff. It's not easy to use when it comes to that customization aspect. And this is where they're all starting to kind of link in with each other. So we'll set it at a 3.5. So next up is functionality. And in terms of functionality in regards to like interactivity, you do actually get a good amount of blocks or sort of interactive elements, and along with questions as well. You get a good variety and a good starting point to be able to really vary your interactivity. So I think from that aspect, actually, you get a lot of functionality, which is not usually seen in this kind of continuous scroll style authoring tool. I think also functionality in terms of being able to change the settings and to things like duplicating courses and screens and creating like branching courses and that. I would say it's actually quite good in that aspect. You do have, I'd say, quite a big scope to create courses in the way you want them to. So in terms of the navigation and how you want the learner to interact with the course, in the sense of, do you want it to be continuous scroll? Do you want a mix of both? Like, I think that aspect, actually, you do get a good amount of functionality. So I'm going to sit it at, let's go for 3.5. I think, again, it's that blurring of lines between functionality and customization, because if we get into the customization side and the being able to change the functionality of being able to resize imagery and stuff, then it's going to get marked right down because we don't have that. So I don't think I can mark it higher than that, because we are missing key functionality like changing the padding of columns, being able to align text, resize imagery. So I think the only reason it's getting a 3.5 is the fact that I think we do get a good range of interactive elements and static elements to be able to build out varied e-learnings. And customization, and I think we all know what I'm going to say about this. It's going to have to be a 2. think the only thing bringing it up is that theming customization. You do get a really good range of options in terms of being able to change like your menu colors, your button states, all of that stuff. So that definitely brings it up in terms of the rating. But other than that, you're so restricted in how you can make these courses feel like your own. Um, it's really basic stuff like not being able to align text and imagery, not being able to center align things in a column, not being able to resize images, um, not kind of the way that everything is restricted to the center of the screen. And then you've got these two really big areas of blank space either side. Um, it's things like that, not being able to change that, which just feel so restrictive with this. And I mean, I find column based authoring tools quite restrictive anyway, because I'm obviously used to things like Storyline where you get a lot of freedom, and even Genially where you can just move things around. And I do understand when you're working with responsive tools that there needs to be an element of pre-done structure to it because of that resizing and everything. So I understand that. But this has to be probably one of the most restrictive authoring tools I've ever used. And I think that in terms of the development time, just using just resizing and playing around with images and column structure to try and get a basic text and image to look good already took up just like far too much time in my eyes, really. So it's got to be a 2 for customization. And I am conscious I'm probably coming at this from a more biased opinion than I have done with the other authoring tools that I've reviewed. I just notoriously do not like this structure of authoring tool. But I think I'm trying to see this from the eyes of a beginner, of somebody that is potentially new to e-learning development. And I think what they've tried to do with this kind of limited column structure is make it easier for a developer. But actually, I think it makes it harder. And you find that the output just looks messy and kind of unorganized, like people haven't considered or done the finishing touches. So when you've got the buttons that are in different places, and you've got the image is lower than the text because you can't center align the text, and then you scale down and you're getting that scroll bar with the flashcards and things. I think that's all things they thought that would actually make the user experience better, but in my opinion, from a design perspective, makes it worse. So I think if you're going to use this authoring tool for e-learning, it would suit basic e-learnings. It would suit kind of short, maybe micro learning style where you can use that continuous scroll feature. I think it suits that continuous scroll over the kind of slide based format. And you can, kind of keep things very simple, not include too much imagery, that kind of thing. But I appreciate that I have only been using this tool for, a few days to play around with it. And there may be people that use this on a daily basis and have got some tips or tricks or hacks to making things look good. So, yeah, do let me know if you do use it and you actually find it quite good. I don't think I'm going to be a GoMo user anytime soon. It's going to be getting in the bin with Captivate for me. But yeah, if you enjoy it and you use it and have an example of a course, then please share. I would love to see examples of people that have made this look good. Make me eat my words on this. And yep, do share if you've made this look a million times better than I have, which is not hard, to be honest. Mine is terrible. So, and on that note, I will end this video. This has got to be my longest Emma tries yet. So if you are still here, thank you. And I will catch you in the next one.